Hello. Last video, I told the story of my first episode psychosis, leading to the diagnosis of schizophrenia and the negative effects it had on my life. This time, I'm telling the story of the years of remission and my journey into relapse. Here's another table to help follow the story. So by 2019, the feelings of victimization, depression, auditory hallucination, grandiose delusion, and religious delusion were gone. The suicidal ideations and homicidal ideations were gone as well. What remained were the paranoid ideations, persecutory ideation, suspiciousness, anhedonia, emotional blunting, and concentration issues. These would end up being my residual symptoms. Remission for me was not a complete and total remission. Some symptoms cleared up, while some reduced in intensity. The paranoid ideations and persecutory ideations were not only less intense, they were also less frequent in occurrence and easily dismissible. Of course, because they did not completely resolve, mild concentration issues remained, but these were easily overridden and not usually occurring. The emotional blunting continued, which reduced the intensity of my emotions. The loss of pleasure in old interests also continued. This was still a time when I withdrew socially. I avoided social interaction with people I used to know. However, I could bring myself to interact with people that I had to interact with. The difference is before I withdrew socially out of fear. Now I was socially withdrawn because I've lost interest in continuing with social relationships. I just wanted to be alone at this time. 2018, 2019 were years of rest for me. I just stayed home. Or rather, I just stayed in my room, rested, and played computer games. I stopped reading books. The thought of academic work actually disgusted me. I also avoided things that reminded me of my previous life. I stayed away from anything academic, and I stayed away from my social circle. It was a time of being alone, and I refused to think. Eventually, eventually, although I wanted time to stop, I decided I had to keep going with my life, even without the interest to do so. So I decided to change careers, and I went back to school in 2020, albeit this time, it was no longer the old career path that I was pursuing. There was no real change in in my constellation of symptoms in 2020 nor in 2021. In fact, I started developing interest in the new field that I was entering into. Thus, I started my new program during the fall of 2020, and this continued into 2021. I still had mild paranoid and persecutory ideations, but these were only about classmates. By now, the pattern that I experienced suspiciousness and paranoia towards my colleagues is well established to me. In fact, I did not think anything similar to the episode of 2016-2017 would ever return. It's been 3 to 4 years of stability. Plus, my psychiatric prognosis was good due to the fact that I received treatment relatively early, and I had my first episode psychosis during my late 20s or early 30s. I did not believe I would experience anything like that again. I thought the worst was over, and it would never happen ever again. It was not obvious to me at the time, but a slight change did occur in 2022. The summer of 2022 was the most stressful term of my program. It was also the last term of my program. It was during that term that I encountered some challenges that almost completely overwhelmed me. Consequently, the suspiciousness, the paranoia and persecutory ideations intensified. They gained some strength. A bit. I suspected the reason why I was struggling was because there were people working against me. My intensified paranoia made me ideate that there might be a conspiracy to derail my new career, to force me back to my old career. Increasingly, I thought that certain people were working together to ensure my failure. The sleep disturbance also changed its pattern. It went from oversleeping to insomnia. 2 to 3 nights a week, I would have difficulty falling asleep. So much so that I started taking sleeping aids. The concentration issues also increased, but they were still manageable. Fortunately, despite everything, I managed to finish my program and graduate during the fall of 2022. After that, during the fall of 2022, the symptoms subsided once more and returned to the same levels before that stressful 2022 summer term. I was relieved, and it confirmed to me that it was just stress. It was around this time that I decided to taper down on my medications. I was mostly certain and hopeful that it would be fine. By November 2022, I was completely off my medications, and nothing happened. By January of 2023, I informed my psychiatrist that I was no longer on medications. I also informed him that I no longer wanted to be on medications. My psychiatrist disagreed and recommended that I take my medications. However, at this point, I was encouraged by the fact that I went off the medications and nothing happened. Nothing changed. So after a few more meetings, my psychiatrist discharged me. It was an amicable discharge. I was pretty happy about it. I was even more happy when my old interests returned. It was like a rebirth of my interest in politics, economics, and philosophy. In fact, I started reading politics, economics, and philosophy books again. It made me really hopeful. Months passed, and still nothing happened psychiatrically. Something did happen in my life in April 2023. That is, I started working again. It felt like my life was back on track. My old passions returned, and I was working in my new field. A few weeks into my job, the suspiciousness, paranoia, and persecutory ideations slightly intensified. Looking back, my auditory hallucinations also returned, but back then the auditory hallucinations were so infrequent that I could easily dismiss it. I also knew that at this point, that stress had a tendency to exacerbate my symptoms. Still, I remember that I went through a stressful summer of 2022 and survived it. My work during the summer of 2023 was also stressful, but not as stressful as the summer of 2022. I was certain everything was under control. The auditory hallucinations manifested in me overhearing my workers speaking ill of me. At the time, I thought they could actually be really speaking ill of me. But if it is an auditory hallucination, I've dealt with something like this before, and I know it's not real. Besides, my insight into my illness was stronger now, and the auditory hallucinations happened so infrequently that overall, it did not bother me. My paranoia informed me that some, but not all of my coworkers were out to get me. The persecutory ideations was about the management and my university department conspiring together to get me fired. Still, I could use my reality testing techniques and rule it out as a possibility. I am unable to say anything about the social withdrawal symptoms at this time, because I still wanted to distance myself from others. But in my line of work, that's not possible, and I could motivate myself to interact with my coworkers and others if I needed to. The insomnia remained, which tended to make me go to work with less than 6 to 5 hours of sleep the night before. Fortunately, I overcame my struggles. I still decided to change where I work by September 2023. I had two reasons for the change. The first reason is I wanted to work somewhere closer to home. I did not want to commute an hour and a half to work every morning. It does not help with my sleep. The second is, thanks to my paranoid feelings and ideas about my coworkers, I wanted a change in scenery. So by November 2023, I had a new workplace, and it was only a 30-minute commute from home. The flow of my new workplace was also slower, meaning less stress. To me, I finally found what I was looking for. I experienced a reduction in paranoia, persecutory ideations, and suspiciousness. I also became more socially outgoing and put an effort into socialization. There was nothing to cause me concentration issues. I also do not recall any auditory hallucinations during this period. I started to think that my schizophrenia would never bother me again. 2023 turned into 2024, and things remained the same. That is, until June 2024. I didn't know it at the time, but from June to August 2024, I was actually building up to a relapse. This time, the psychotic symptoms would surpass the intensity of my first episode psychosis in 2016-2017. It is also far more complex and far more bizarre than what I had previously experienced. That is why the story of my relapse will get its own video. Thank you for listening.